What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, November 13th, 2018, getting into the middle of the month here, heading on down to Thanksgiving holiday and all that entails. We have got a lot of stuff to share with you today, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. Our YouTube channel is, in fact, running again today. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you already know that here. So let's get on into it here right now. And the corporate media is trying to basically downplay and dismiss what's been going on across the country in terms of very obvious voter fraud, ballot box stuffing. It's never been more obvious. We had some callers who called in yesterday and said, yeah, it's never been this bad. And it's true. It's never been this obvious. And the corporate media is trying to make it go away. But apparently in the latest development down in Florida, they're now acknowledging that as many as 200,000 non-citizens may have voted down there. 200,000. Obviously, that's enough to shift an election. We were talking about this report that came out of California yesterday, where California DMVs are handing out ballots to illegal immigrants who then fill them out and send them in using the names of already registered voters. And when the registered voters show up at the polling place and vote, their ballots are discarded because the mail-in ballots are given priority. Obviously, it should be the reverse here. Okay, now a lot of attention is being focused on Broward County Election Supervisor Brenda Snipes. And apparently she has been sued in the past by a conservative group for maintaining inaccurate voter rolls. And apparently when she was sued, she was assisted by two organizations financed by, you knew this was coming, George Soros. And I am really getting sick and tired of this guy just mucking about with our country. Being a billionaire does not give you any more rights or privileges than any other citizen. Soros was not elected to do anything involving with the government. He's not appointed by the people. He's not even that well liked. But he's just in the middle of it right now. Okay, so they had this case back in 2017, and the ACLU basically had data saying that Brenda Snipes was failing to take steps to maintain accurate voter rosters. And we had that other story that came out the other day about how down in Florida, they have literally thousands of registered voters who are over 100 years of age, which is a demographic impossibility. Anyway, during this lawsuit with the ACLU, Snipe admitted that, yes, ineligible voters were slipping through, and the lawsuit focused on voter lists that included dead people. I guess they were running shuttle buses from the cemeteries to the polling places this last week. One registered voter who was a 130-year-old, felons who are not supposed to vote in Florida, duplicate registrations, invalid addresses, and improbably high voter registration rates. And Snipes said that, yeah, some people who are registered, they're not eligible to vote and they slip through, but we're doing the best that we can, and it's not fraud, it's just incompetence. It's just a huge job, and yeah, we made a lot of mistakes. But you know what's really interesting? The mistakes always seem to favor the Democrats. And that, too, is a statistical impossibility, because if you are having honest, random mistakes, they should fall equally on either side of that center line. They should favor the Republicans as often as they favor the Democrats, but they never do. Article coming out of Investment Watch blog saying that recounts rarely change the election results, but when they do, it favors the Democrats. We already know down there in Broward County, they're not letting, they're trying to keep the media out from the recount. So it's a stolen election. It's a stolen election. Okay, over at the White House, it looks like Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen is going to be let go from her post at the Department of Homeland Security. And apparently Trump has canceled a planned trip with Nielsen to the southern border to meet with the U.S. troops who are supposed to be protecting that southern border from the migrant horde. And sources in the White House are saying the president wants her out as soon as possible and is basically citing her inability to implement his immigration enforcement policies. So they're already looking for a replacement. Now, Chief of Staff John Kelly has been lobbying Trump to keep her on. He was at the Department of Homeland Security before he was promoted to White House Chief of Staff. She took over the job. He's been on her side, but it isn't really working all out. And so she's going to be gone. Now, interestingly enough, Trump is also going to remove John Bolton's top deputy, Mira Ricardo, over an unspecified dispute with the First Lady. Now, here we're getting into a little bit of a gray area where apparently Melania just demanded this person be fired. And we're still trying to figure out why. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And apparently this Bolton's advisor Mira and Melania Trump just didn't get along. Apparently Melania is also apparently desirous that John Kelly be let go over a clash between them. Now, see, here's where it gets complicated. There is actually no office of the First Lady. If you read your Constitution, it's not there. It's a courtesy title, but it carries no lawful authority with it. And I understand that people inside the White House would want to get on the president's good side by being on the First Lady's good side. And it may just be a case of John Kelly and Bolton, or rather Bolton's aide, trying to exploit Melania. Maybe they were putting pressure on her to put pressure on Donald Trump, and she just got fed up. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But it does look like we're entering a period where the White House is going to go through a lot of shakeups in the very, very near future. And let's look at this. Oh, man, I'm seeing some of these photos of the California wildfire taken from space. It's ugly. Those poor people. All righty. So, apparently, over at the Department of Justice, the acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, appears to be caving into Democratic pressure regarding recusing himself from supervision of the Robert Mueller witch hunt. Or at least he's going through a politically correct step, saying that he will seek advice from an ethics council about recusing himself. Now, of course, the Democrats are making a big stink over Matt Whitaker being the acting attorney general, because Matt Whitaker, prior to being in the Department of Justice, was very critical of the Mueller investigation, saying it was a waste of time and money and wasn't really being productive. All of which is true, by the way. All of which is true. But the Democrats are basically taking this position that nobody's allowed to have a personal opinion coming on into that job unless it lines up with the Democratic agenda of finding some way to get Donald Trump. We're going to get Donald Trump here. So they've been piling on the pressure on Whitaker to recuse himself. They're piling the pressure onto Trump to get somebody else in there in place of Whitaker. We're having all of these politicians in Congress who are standing up screaming that it's unconstitutional and illegal for Donald Trump to put an acting attorney general in there without the advice and consent of Congress. Well, actually, yeah, it is. It's called an interim appointment. And it is perfectly legal, and it is perfectly constitutional, and Trump does have that authority because he just fired the last attorney general. What's he supposed to do? Leave the office empty? Doesn't work like that. But it's very, very clear that the Democrats are in a panic. First of all, that they're going to lose their favorite dead horse that they love to flog, which is the Mueller investigation. And second, that there may be an attorney general at the Department of Justice who actually might decide to do the job and start looking into things like, well, for example, the Uranium One deal or the Clintons' so-called charitable foundation or Hillary's email server and whether or not it was a security risk to the United States of America. Now we're getting another confirmation, this one from the Still Report, that in point of fact, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg will retire in January of next year, which means we get to go through this whole Brett Kavanaugh circus all over again. You know, they're going to get, Trump is going to nominate a conservative, and immediately there's going to be 562 women standing up saying, oh my goodness, he touched my private parts when we were in kindergarten. It really is getting silly. You know, there are a lot of people who don't seem to understand. There is supposed to be a hierarchy of authority in this nation, in this government, as set forth in that Constitution. Now, again, qualifying it by saying that Trump has been a tremendous disappointment to me. But he is the president. Okay, and just going to have to live with that. Now, as you know, CNN has filed a complaint challenging the suspension of Jim Acosta's press credentials. And Sarah Sanders has responded to it, saying, this is just more grandstanding from CNN. And it's a frivolous lawsuit. It is an annoying lawsuit. CNN already has 50 people who have press credentials to the White House. And Jim Acosta is no more or less special than any other media outlet or reporter with respect to the First Amendment. And again, if you go back and you look at the videos, Acosta was behaving very, very badly. And he refused to surrender his microphone to the intern. He slapped the intern away so that other reporters didn't get their chance to ask their questions. And it's not the first time he's done that. Now, the obligation of the White House press corps and Sarah Huckabee Sanders is to run an orderly and fair process where each reporter has their say. And one reporter grandstanding at all does not serve the First Amendment. It's not really a First Amendment issue. It's a courtesy issue. It's a professional issue. Anyway, we have a caller on the line here. Let's go to Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, this guy Whitaker, as far as him recusing himself, that's a personal decision, whether he nobody can force him, no matter what the deal is, nobody can force him to recuse himself.
No, nobody can.
Fire him. They can fire him. This
Only
guy is
Trump
a smart
can fire
guy.
him.
Right. Trump can fire him. There's only this guy Whitaker is a smart guy. He graduated from college. He went to the University of Aiea, graduated in 3 years, and then in his fourth year, he played football. He was in law school already, and he was still playing on the intercollegiate football team. I've never heard of anybody doing that before. So he's got to be pretty smart. He graduated in 3 years, and while he was playing football in Big Ten football, and then, but you know, you're right. Anybody with any sense knows that Mueller's deal is crazy. You know, you don't have to be a genius to be able to see that. So,
well, you know, the
this
fact of the
guy
matter
has
is,
an
I mean, the
opinion.
Democrat attitude is that nobody's allowed to have an opinion, you know, coming into the Department of Justice unless it lines up with theirs. But the fact of the matter is, as Attorney General, as the guy sitting at the top, his personal judgment does come into play. His job is to look at the various investigations, processes going on within the Department of Justice and say, this is working, this is not working. This case is worth pursuing, this one's a waste of time. That is, in fact, part of the job description. And the Democrats, you know, they want Mueller's investigation to keep going, even though it's produced absolutely nothing of value. They're drooling, waiting to get the House of Representatives in January, and they're just going to start firing accusations at Trump left and right, and they want Mueller to be in position to go on and prosecute, and they don't want an attorney general who's going to get in the way.
Right. I don't know what they're going to do as far as getting a permanent attorney general, but good thing is in the Senate, Trump has even more senators than he did before, and he's going to be able to get this replacement for Ruth Ginsburg through, and plus there's other court appointments, you know, and what's going to happen with the House there, he'll probably make a deal with an infrastructure, which is what he wants anyway, some kind of an infrastructure, and the Democrats will love that, and we'll go into debt, more bankrupt than we already are, but at least maybe we'll get some new bridges out of it. I'll let you go, Mike. Thanks.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot here, and unfortunately right now it is still a little too soon to say what the final results of the midterms are, because the Democrats are screaming for recounts all over the country, and they're definitely trying to whittle down the GOP lead in the Senate, and they're still going at it left and right. They're demanding a recount, and what we need are for more of these GOP candidates who were told they lost, you know, by narrow margins. They need to start demanding recounts, and ultimately, all of us, every single American, needs to stand up and say, "This is ridiculous. This has gone on way too long. We went through all of this back in 2000. It's been 18 years. We were promised that this system was going to be fixed, and it has not been fixed." So, all right, let's let me do something here real quick. 2 seconds. All right, I hate automatic updates here. Now, getting on back to porn lawyer Michael Avenatti. He is actually out there filing charges against Tucker Carlson. We're going to get all of these people here. And apparently the case is based on an allegation of an alleged assault on a gay Latino immigrant last month. Now, Tucker Carlson has already responded to that, saying that this gay Latino immigrant called his teenage daughter a whore at a Virginia country club. Avenatti has a video of the confrontation, but it does not actually show that an assault occurred. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we've got callers waiting on the line, and we're going to start with Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
As the reality TV show world turns, what a joke this whole thing is. people are coming and going with Trump, you know, good or bad. But, man, the world's moving away from us. We're all dilly-dallying with this crap. We got soybeans sitting in storehouses, rotting away. I mean, my God, people. I mean, Putin was just in Singapore the other day. He's making deals. The Chinese are making deals. We don't have no infrastructure being fixed. We keep talking about this, you know. I mean, my God. Well, Mike, you know, I think it's finished. It's over. It's just, you know, like they say, gridlock in Washington. But this is more than that now. This is just like faction fighting now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty bad.
Absolutely.
And yesterday, I know you didn't get to this because of the problem with the YouTube, but the stock market was down 602 points. And again, I think today was down maybe 100.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was, you know, they can't keep it up, and the Fed is not going to back off on the rate increases. The Dow closed at minus 100.69, S&P down 4. The NASDAQ finished microscopically in the green.
But people are real, like, there's nowhere to go with this, because if they reverse course, then it's obvious that it's never can be fixed. It's broken. It's on like life support. You know, it's like a patient being on life support. You know, if you pull the plug, that's it. You know, I mean, it's finished. I mean, there's no, and you know what, Mike? If inflation, they got to raise the rates because of inflation, right? Because food prices are going up and this or that, right? That's why. Yeah. So I mean, they're stuck. I mean, hey, Mike, I want to talk. Did you hear about Acura? The RDX SUV is moving the product line from the U.S. to China?
No, I hadn't heard that, but frankly, I'm not surprised. I mean, that's a good way to evade the tariffs.
And then, Mike, one more thing. You know, like with the Trump's tax cuts, he wants to. Remember, he was talking about having a middle class tax cut, but people don't realize. You got to, like, borrow the money for the tax cuts, so what are we getting in the end, you know?
Oh, yeah. We're setting another record for a deficit. And, yeah. It's...
I mean, I'm not bashing Trump. I mean, you know, I voted for him, but, I mean, I know he's stuck. But, I mean, he did this to himself partially because he's putting in people in what we didn't vote in him to do. You know, and he had the ability to fix numerous times people he put in and other things, and he didn't do it. Like the election rigging, he could have fixed that, and other things he could have fixed. You know, I mean, I don't understand. You know, you would think he. You know, I mean, I'm sorry if everybody's coming after me, Mike. I'm going to go to a scorched earth policy eventually. I'm just going to fire everybody, get people I know that'll do something, and then clean house permanently, the deep state or this or that, you know. Maybe he'll do that I mean, he's already been in there, 2 years? I mean. Yeah,
well, just short of 2 years, but we're all of a sudden starting to see a lot of changes to the White House. I mean, we've got this kerfuffle between the First Lady and Bolton's assistant, and apparently Melania would like John Kelly to be fired. We'll see how much influence she has over Donald Trump. But it does feel like there's going to be a major shakeup in the White House.
It just sucks. It's like reshuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. Like, unless he got rid of Bolton and Pompeo, that's a different story. But, man, we're just moving the deck chairs on the Titanic as far as I'm concerned, man. Like, this, dude, how long can this go on for? You know what I mean? I mean, it's just a wreck.
It is a wreck. It is a wreck, and I've been predicting for quite some time that the future of the United States of America is the Soviet Union-style collapse. First 13 amendments and say, yeah, let's restart the nation and go back to those mechanisms that reserved power to the people and the separate states and kept that central government hamstrung. So,
and then, Mike, real quick, I want to talk about the fire and. Yeah, it's real. I feel bad for the animals, the infrastructure, and the people over there. But there was they were talking about all his matches but no, they was supposedly the PG&E or whatever, like the one of the power lines or something had a problem because
Yes.
you saw like the map. It shows you at the beginning of where, and the wind blew it from there the opposite direction. You see where that is like there's like some kind of a PG&E system there, I believe.
Yeah, and that's the one that's up in Northern California. And then the Southern California one has been started by failing equipment at SoCal Edison. And it probably was the wind broke these power lines and dropped them down onto the dry brush, and the fires took off. Anyway, Dustin, stay on the line. Got to take another break for commercials. I want to come back and talk about this after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. We're talking about those horrific fires out in California, which at least 2 of them were started from downed power lines that were brought down in the high winds, and they sparked the fire because of all that dry brush that had not been cleaned away, and the high winds drove the fires forward, and it's turned out this is the worst fire disaster in California's history. It really is. And of course, Governor Brown, also known as Governor Moonbeam, is out there saying, well, all of this was caused by human-caused global warming. Really? That's really the fault lies. Actually, no, because apparently a few years ago, the California legislature passed a law that would have required that power lines be buried in conduit underground rather than left up on the poles because of California's long history of wildfires started by power lines being blown down by the high winds, which California always gets. And Governor Moonbeam vetoed that as a favor to the power companies who didn't want to spend that money. So that's, Trump is right. This is a classic case of we're going to be paying more for the interest on the national debt than we spend on defense. And you know how much we spend on defense.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I want to talk about what's your take on Macron with this European army, which they ain't got the money for. But, like, Angela Merkel's now on board with that. But, I don't think Germany can afford to pay for a whole European army because, they got high unemployment rate in all of Europe, pretty much. I don't know. I can't,
the European economy's in serious trouble. That's why Brussels is trying to basically extort a divorce payment out of Great Britain for Brexit. But Macron and Merkel are globalists, New World Order people, and they understand that to further that agenda, they need to basically pull Europe together into a single entity. And that means getting rid of what remains of the borders of the member states, getting rid of the independent military in those states, having a single military that would basically lord over the European Union. And that's it. Merkel and Macron, every decision they've made over the last several years, it's all about pushing that New World Order, one world government agenda.
And then real quick on Theresa May, did you see her speech the other day? Like, they want to do trade again with Russia, but they call them like a threat at the same time. It's like a bizarre. Russia should not even go near Britain anymore. They're obviously untrustworthy. Look east. Head east, my friend, because you can be friends with these people again, but Mike, you know what? It's the system, and the system will always stab you in the back. And the West have shown its true intentions to Russia and China. And to people that it doesn't like or agree with economically, backstabbers.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter who's the president, it's the system. So I would probably tell Theresa May, go scratch, because, and just no offense to the British people, it's not their fault, it's their government. But, they're a kind of a rotting corpse also, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, the entire West is, and that was a downside of this push toward globalism and integration, because we're all getting dragged down together.
You notice how they have all these protests against Trump? Where was all the protests against the wars like now? There hasn't been a big protest. Like, they were having a baby Trump again, the big floating baby Trump, right? And where's all the protests against Yemen, Syria? It's just sad, man, But have a good show, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Ron in Montana. Aloha, Ron. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I have a question. Is it possible for the president to decertify the election?
I do not believe so. Basically, the certification of elections takes place at the state level. So it would be up to the governor of a state to say, I think there's a problem here and we need to go back into it. Unfortunately, in the case of Florida, Governor Scott has a vested interest. He's running for the Senate. I think the issue here is that the system is broken. It doesn't really have checks and balances anymore. It's wide open to fraud here. In fact, I just put up a story at whatreallyhappened.com where apparently prisoners were being given absentee ballots to fill out the day after the election. I mean, that's how out of control the whole system is. There should be a mechanism where somebody can stand up and say, hey, this didn't work. We've got to do something about it. And of course, there was that the Battle of Athens. I think that was either Tennessee or Georgia, where there was a very obvious case of election rigging, and the citizens of the town literally stole back the ballot boxes in order to guarantee an accurate count. And we may be nearing a situation where we're going to have to do that.
Well, we're going to be in a lot of trouble if he can't reverse that election, because they're emboldened now. They know they can get away with it, and Hillary can get in there and win the election without any problem.
Yeah,
So
I'm afraid that's
really
the real problem here. I mean, after 2018, Trump should have done something, and he didn't. And that just emboldened the Democrats to crank up even more election fraud for the midterms. And you just know they're going to put pedal to the metal. It's 2020. They're going to shove whoever their candidate is going to get the White House. And I hope it's not going to be Hillary, but there's still persistent talk that it could be. And they'll consolidate the House and take the Senate, and it's going to be fraudulent from beginning to end because nobody will do anything about this crooked election system that has been foisted on us.
Well, Michael, I have been a lifelong Democrat. I'm 82 years old. I never once voted for a Republican until this election, and I voted a straight Republican ticket. I wouldn't vote for a Democrat if they nominated Mother Teresa. You know, I'm just really upset about this whole thing.
Well, a lot of people really are, and there are a lot of people who think that the actual reality at the ballot box level is that the Democrats took a major clubbing this last midterm election. You know, we're talking baby seal territory, and the only reason that they came out in control of the House and did as well as they did was massive election fraud. The evidence is there. Somebody needs to look at this. There does need to be an investigation, and that is something that Trump could do, is basically send the FBI down there and say, we're going to take a look at what's going on here. You know, there are laws that say records of the election have to be preserved. In a lot of these disputed elections, the laws are ignored and records are destroyed. In fact, Brenda Snipes was in legal trouble before when there was a question over the re-election of Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And that election was contested by the opponent, and Brenda basically destroyed all the paper original ballots and only kept the computer records, which said Schultz had won. That was it. And she got into trouble for it, but nothing. She didn't go to jail, didn't pay a fine. It was a wrist slap.
Yeah, well, it's a mess, and I don't know how we're ever going to get this straightened away, Mike. We're going to
have to restart the country. We're going to have to let it all fall apart, and then we're going to have to restart the country and go back to what worked for the American people rather than what works for the ultra-rich. And
maybe it's time for star chambers.
I think we already have those, but they always work against the people as well. All right. Anyway, listen.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael.
All right, Ron. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. The people that count the votes are the ones that decide the outcome. Getting back to your thing about forest management in California, like Dustin kind of talked about a little bit in New York, and I have experience with this because I used to drive down to just north of New York City all the time to do some work coming from Buffalo. And I take different routes all the time instead of just the I-90, to Albany and then straight down. Number one, they let everything creep up to the road so that even like deers, one year, Mike, I counted 100 deers driving down there that were hit and dead.
Yeah.
So they got the brush right up against the road. They don't cut it back. So the deers, the deer or does, they don't even see you coming. Number one, and number two, I mean, they do the same thing in all the little small towns and cities. They let all these trees encroach on the power lines.
Yeah.
They don't cut them back. And so you end up with all these problems like power outages. In a storm, and that it's insane. You were talking about burying the lines. All the new, everything that gets built new up here in Canada, they always bury the lines for obvious reasons.
Yes.
But in the fall, like in the late summer and early fall, they always cut back all the trees that are around the power lines because they know what's going to happen.
Yes.
And Mike, I've been to so many small towns in New York and Minnesota and Utah, and I've seen the same thing over and over again. These power companies, they're private. They don't care if these trees are, growing around and all the branches are growing around the lines. They don't care. They really don't. They're just worried about getting their cash. And of course, when the power lines go down, well, they could charge even more to get it all fixed.
Well, yeah,
so
it's unfortunately from the point of view of the power companies, it's cheaper to just repair the downed lines than to constantly maintain, the trees and keep them cut back here. And of course, there's always a lot of finger pointing who's really responsible for it. Here in Hawaii, they're very good about keeping those power lines clear from the trees. Most of our power lines are, in fact, underground here. In Washington State, the way that we dealt with the deer is you could actually buy what were called deer whistles that you would glue to the underside of the front of your car. And as you would drive down the road, they would put out this ultrasonic sound that the deer could hear, and they would know that you were coming. And so we didn't really have that problem as well. But yeah, you can't just let the forest go wild and then not expect it's going to behave like a wild forest, which includes wildfires from time to time. And as I said, the real agenda in California was money. They didn't want to spend the money to maintain the forests. And they used as an excuse this environmentalism. We're going to let the forest go back to being how nature made it, ignoring the fact that they had tried that with Yellowstone years before, which resulted in the worst wildfire in the park's history.
Exactly. They just let everything sit out in the forest and rot, just waiting for anything, a thunderstorm, something, just to set it off, and then it's all up in smoke. And people they forget or they don't realize that California was a desert.
Yes.
It used to be a desert before the 1930s. So, what do you think is going to happen? It's insanity, Mike. I mean, these people are mad. These green liberals, I mean, they have no idea. I saw a video on your website, and these liberals going around and they're trying to persuade people to vote different ways just before the election. They go right up to them and look at these people. Come on, go take a bath, wash your hair, and smarten up. What is wrong with you? It's very upsetting, Mike, because it's happening up here too. But thankfully, people are starting to see the light and they're voting conservative again.
Yes,
thankfully. Because, I mean, this nonsense has gone on long enough. I mean, you know, this anything goes, and people could do whatever they want, you know, forget about the laws, you know, little children, well, you know, who cares, and blah, blah, blah. No. And the liberal monetary system, I mean, it's killing us. It's strangling us. It's strangling the whole world. The West is bankrupt. We're done. And that's the only reason why the East is looking so good now. I appreciate your time, Mike. Thank you very much for taking my call.
All right, thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to Layla in Ontario. Layla, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. First, this isn't what I was going to call, what I called about, but I have to disagree with some of what Al said. Yes, Canada is going to hell under the Liberals. It has been for decades. The brief respite that we had under Stephen Harper, even then, Stephen Harper, I think, was complying with the globalist agenda to some extent. However, Al says that in Canada, they bury the power lines. I don't know what part of Canada he lives in, but they do not bury the power lines all over Canada, because in some areas there's a high water table.
And that's the
problem. Seem to appear now and then. Yeah, it's just not that simple. But furthermore, he's forgetting about the wildfires in Alberta and British Columbia. I mean, we were plagued with those for, I think, 2 summers, and there was, including the islands in the islands in the I can't remember, the San Juan Strait or whatever it is. But anyway, what I called about was the concept of possibly creating a European army. That's going to be done. If they're talking about it now, they're preparing us for it incrementally. And as for Macron, he's got an Oedipal complex. I mean, look at his mother. Anything that that Grandma or Mama Merkel says, he's going to agree with it. That's where he takes his orders. Much like our very effeminate Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. As I said, he doesn't run the government. He's simply the mascot. And people like Ralph Goodale are running the government.
Okay, Layla.
We've really got to...
Layla, I got to put you on hold.
Yes.
Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Layla in Ontario. And Layla, if you would just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I was talking about the fact that so many of the male leaders are quite effeminate, and not all of them, thank God for men like Viktor Orban, and I think it's Babiš in the Czech Republic, and I believe Italy, too, has a strong leader. The problem, I don't know, do you remember the Survivalist Movement of the 1980s?
Oh, yeah. Now we call them preppers.
Exactly. But we were actually, my husband and I were getting ready then. And we knew of a lot of militias that were already formed and operating secretly in different parts of the U.S.
Yes.
However, they were found and destroyed. Now, I think they were getting ready in the 80s to do what they're doing now. However, they knew that there were too many men and women prepared to fight for their liberty. So they probably then introduced incrementally a willingness. The best way to gain compliance is to make it voluntary. And so rather than use force, especially against so many millions or billions of people, the best way to gain compliance is to make it internal. Religion used to do that.
Yes.
So now what they've done is they've made perversion or distortion of oneself into the new religion. And it's become voluntary because it's been internalized. It was done through movies. It's almost impossible now to even watch a movie without seeing the underlying propaganda.
Yes.
It was done through fashion. It was done through what they called metrosexuals when they talked about men.
Yes.
It was done about men finding their feminine side and about women gaining their liberty and women building up their muscles and going into gyms. And the horror, the terror of childbirth being a terrible thing for a woman to go through. So if you happen to get pregnant when you engage in promiscuous sexuality, as you're entitled to, just like men, then childbirth is horrible. Well, excuse me, I know a lot of women who had very easy childbirth.
Yes.
I just found a picture of myself in labor where I was laughing just an hour before my son was born. And I had absolutely no pain. I used to take more painkillers for a headache. Childbirth can be easy when you follow the advice that my mother gave me. Let your body do what it knows what to do. Do not interfere with it.
Yeah.
And so so the tension, when you accept that ideology that I don't have to think about breathing because it happens. I don't have to think about swallowing because it happens, because my body knows what it's supposed to do. But instead, we've taken that away, the natural function of the body, and it's been done through so many ways, through fashion, through music. I can hear the music, so I guess I'd better let you go.
Yeah, Layla, we got to take a break here for station identification. Thank you for the phone call, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's take a phone call from Matthew in Canada. Aloha, Matthew. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Matthew, are you there? I'm not hearing Matthew. Going once, going twice. Okay, well, maybe he'll come on back here, okay. So we were talking about the wildfires in the last hour, and Trump has now approved a major disaster declaration for California, which is a good thing to be doing. And the utilities in the areas where the fires have been burning, their stocks are plummeting because they're losing so much of the infrastructure that will have to be replaced. You know, power lines, everything. I mean, it's just been a disaster for absolutely everybody. And again, the blame game is on. Governor Jerry Brown is out there still saying this is all human-caused global warming, and that Trump is wrong to say that the forests were mismanaged. So they're going back and forth. Okay, so we lost him. All right. Matthew, if you're listening, call back in. We'll put you back on the air here. So anyway, apparently back in 2016, there was a California State Senate Bill 1463, electrical lines mitigation, which could have potentially reduced or prevented these fires. All right, we've got Matthew in Canada back. Aloha, Matthew. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay. I was at many simulations, and most of them went live. Some are not famous. Some are. And now with the ones that went live, now, they always went with the official story.
What are we talking about here?
Okay, I went to many simulations.
Simulations of what?
Most of them went live. Barry and Honey Sherman, Las Vegas.
Okay.
Parkland school shooting, Santa Fe school shooting. I've got lots, and I can tell you each one in detail what happened at the simulation, and that went live. Okay, so the Las Vegas one was different, very different in that there were a couple things. There were, in the simulation, there were multiple shooters, and Paddock was the patsy. I know that those two things don't go together. But why wouldn't, like all the other ones went with the official story when they went live, but this one didn't. They're still going, lone gunman. So I was just wondering what you thought about that. Why would they do it different on this one?
It's entirely possible that something went wrong and they were having to improvise. We know that certainly happened with 9/11, because Flight 93 was supposed to crash into building number 7, and instead the flight crew regained control of the aircraft, at which point it was shot down because the facts on the plane didn't match the official story. That left the planners of 9/11 with a building wired full of explosives, and they just had to say, you know, it's coming down because of the fire. So I think in a lot of these circumstances, things do go wrong, and they are forced to improvise and change the story. And I think that may have been the case in the Mandalay Bay.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, that's great. Thank you very much for your information.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot, Matthew. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are now open. 800-313-9443. So let's talk about the conflict zones, and there are a lot of them here. And over in Afghanistan, apparently the Taliban is resurgent. They're carrying out offensive actions against several provinces around Afghanistan. And the Afghan government, this being the one that was installed by the United States, was 17 years ago, is being forced to prioritize who gets the reinforcement. They're running out of people. They're running out of supplies here. And over this last weekend, that meant sending special forces to the Jaghori district of Ghazni. And the district was long seen as safe. Well, apparently not anymore. The Taliban are not only routing the Shiite militias, but defeating the reinforcements as well. They killed 25 commandos and continue to advance deeper into the district. So we're losing that one, just like we're losing Syria. And the U.S. doesn't want to admit it, obviously, because that will pull the rug out from the continuing war agenda. They've got a momentum going. They've got a long list of countries yet to be invaded. And when you're engaged in a program like that, the first defeat can be the end of the agenda. People lose their taste for war when it doesn't look like you are marching victorious from war to war to war. And again, look at the history of World War II. Germany came on out with the Blitzkrieg and mechanized warfare, and they were just doing a very effective campaign. Then they went up against the Russians, and they got defeated. And it was pretty much downhill for the Nazis following that. Following that retreat from Moscow, the Nazis were on the defensive. They got kicked out of Africa. There was the invasion at Normandy, and they were in retreat from then on. That was it. Alrighty, over in Syria yet again, the U.S.-led coalition has been caught transferring by helicopter Daesh terrorists from Syria's Hasaka to an undisclosed location. So they're evacuating the leadership, which may mean that the U.S. realizes they can't keep Hasaka, but it is another reminder that contrary to all the propaganda that we were fed by the corporate media about how ISIS was evil and ISIS was cutting off people's heads and ISIS was stealing socks out of your dryer, that ISIS was in fact a creature of the U.S. covert state. Now, as you know, they're having this big get-together up in Paris. It's causing a little bit of friction. Apparently, Donald Trump has been responding to Macron's comment about nationalism being bad, and that patriotism means patriotism to the global community. But one of the other things that happened was that Benjamin Netanyahu is up there holding a whole bunch of meetings. And a lot of people were scratching their head and saying that, well, you know, Israel wasn't part of World War I. They had nothing to do with the armistice. They didn't even exist during World War I. They didn't exist until after World War II. So what was Netanyahu doing? Well, it turns out that Netanyahu was up there trying to form an international coalition to push Iran out of Syria. And so he was having all these meetings just saying, you know, come on down to Syria. We're gonna whoop on Iran. We're gonna get them out of Syria. I can imagine it's a hard sell because he's talking to a lot of the people who were part of the coalition to get Assad, which did not work out. And they're probably not ready to go back in and risk a second drubbing, let alone direct conflict with Russia. But this is a pattern we see coming from Israel. You know, we've got a great idea. We need a war against blah, but you go fight it for us. So that was what Netanyahu was trying to do up there in Paris. Over in Yemen, in Hodeidah, the attacks on Hodeidah are escalating. 150 people have been killed in the last 24 hours. And again, it's the main aid port into Yemen. It's the last port under Houthi control. And if the Saudis grab it, they are going to close it. That will be the end of any humanitarian aid for the people of Yemen. All right, let's take a phone call here. Terry in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I just want to ask a question, get your opinion. Do you think the Democratic Party has been taken over and hijacked by the Zionist New World Order?
Well, I think the Zionists are very much in control of both of our political parties. I think the area with the behavior of the Democratic Party is that they've just decided that the rules and the law do not apply to them. And Trump's big mistake was not looking into this issue of election integrity over the last 2 years. And as a result, he's lost the House of Representatives. And with all these recounts going on all across the country, the Democrats are out there trying to chip away at the GOP control of the Senate. And we're seeing all kinds of things. I mean, we just got this report from Broward County where civil rights attorneys were handing out absentee ballots to inmates to fill out after the election was actually over. That's where they're getting all these magically found ballots that they keep saying, oh my goodness, we found 8,000 ballots last night that need to be counted. And of course, every time they find more of these ballots, they are heavily biased toward the Democratic candidates. And again, it's a national disgrace. Trump dropped the ball on this. And we know both political parties engage in fraud. We all remember Richard Nixon and the Watergate scandal. But the Democrats have just gone completely out of control this election. And it will be much, much worse in 2020 unless somebody somewhere stands up and says this must stop. Because if the American people cannot view the electoral process with a confidence that it is honest, fair, accurate, and accountable, then the contract with the government is broken. We don't have to listen to them anymore. We don't have to do what they tell us anymore. We don't have to pay their bills. We don't have to sacrifice our lives in their wars of conquest because we don't know who's really in charge of the government if they were actually elected to that position or not.
Yes, but it seems like the Democratic agenda, taking down the wall, maybe getting rid of ICE, the same agenda that the New World Order has got.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought possibly, the New World Order people, got into the Democratic Party and said, this is what we're doing, this is what you're doing, and this is your incentive, whether they want to pay for campaigns or what. But it seems like there's too much of a coincidence that they're going in the same direction.
Well, it is no coincidence. The liberals are fully on board with the globalist agenda, the open borders idea. It's no secret that they're very much aligned with that. And of course, for the Democrats, it means that there's a source of new Democratic voters with which to consolidate their power, even though illegal immigrants, non-citizens, are not supposed to vote. But it was happening all over the country last week. And they're even admitting, yeah, okay, non-citizens are voting, big deal. We can't go back and fix it. It wouldn't be fair. And as usual, saying, you're being racist by saying that non-citizens should not vote in this country.
Yeah, you know what? I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that, you betray your country, you destroy your country just for some political gain. That doesn't make any sense.
It's happened before.
Anyway, Mike. Yeah, I guess so. Okay, well, thanks a lot. I appreciate your insight on that.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I think a lot of us would agree that you can vote yourself. You can vote yourself out of a representative, republic, constitutional republic, but you can't vote yourself back into one. We're not going to vote our way out of this. I think a lot of us know that. I can remember when I was young, it was late afternoon, and I can remember sitting on the deck of a U.S. naval ship loading up M16 magazines with 5.56.
Mm-hmm.
Getting ready to go in. We're sitting off the coast of Haiti. It's back in, I forget, the 80s, late 80s sometime. And we're told, okay, you guys are probably going to have to go in there because they're having a problem with, their election. And you guys got to go in and make sure everything, goes down the way it's supposed to and nobody messes with the election. And, fortunately, I just remember thinking, this is not, I don't want to do this. I mean, we didn't have any choice, but, and I remember the pictures, like Time Magazine or whatever it was. You saw it all over the news. The Iraqi woman with her finger dipped in ink or whatever.
Yes.
And you just think of how insane this is, that here in America, we're basically in so many parts of the country like a banana republic. And what are we supposed to do? I mean, the authorities, I won't say law enforcement, but if the authorities can't ensure that every person, every American citizen, one man, one vote, one woman, one vote, if they can't ensure that, then what are we supposed to do? They leave us no choice but to take matters into our own hands.
Yep. Anyway, it is a mess. And again, it's very easy to come up with election systems that are accurate, honest, and verifiable. The mess that we have right now from state to state is because the politicians want the elections to be riggable, because that frees them from the constraints of having to deal with the voters, so that they can spend all of their time pandering to the ultra wealthy individuals and corporations and basically sell the country out to them. And
I see.
Go ahead.
I see, Mike. Flipping through the channels on Veterans Day, which was Sunday, observed yesterday. But all these football games, you got these veterans all over the place, all at all these games. And they're always telling us, the deep state, the media, the mainstream, they're always telling us, oh, you got to support the troops because they're over there fighting for our freedom. They're over there fighting for our, of course, they refer to it as a democracy. They always make sure they do that. But, it's a sacred thing. I mean, there were guys that have died over there, and probably one of their last thoughts, mainly it's one guy fighting for his brother warrior next to him. But there are some idealists in there who died, and one of their last thoughts was, well, I died for our way of life and our representative form. I died for that guy back home, my brother, my father, my sister. I died for their right to vote and be free, and all of that, all that idealistic stuff. They died on beaches. They died. It's sick, man. A lot of them never even had a chance to have a family of their own or anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of them died for these ideals. I'm telling you, it's a sacred thing this one man, one vote thing. And I'm telling you, I'm not just saying this for effect, like sometimes I do. This should be the death penalty. Anyone, I don't care what side you're on, Republican, conservative, Democrat, liberal, anybody who is caught and found to be guilty of trying to affect, to try to steal votes or anything like that. I mean, that should be an executable offense. It's that sacred. That's how I feel.
It is. Now, I don't think death penalty, we need to go there. But there ought to be penalties for people who engage in election fraud. And again, it's like immigration. There are laws, but they're not really being enforced. Anyway, Frank, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting on back, well, first of all, if you can, help out Republic Broadcasting. We really do need your assistance right now. And I know it's the holiday season. You're thinking about, the money that you're going to be spending for Thanksgiving dinner or Thanksgiving travel. And beyond that, you've got Christmas and got to get the Christmas cards out. But we really do need to be included in your plans. And the postal address where you can send a donation is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. We really do need your assistance. It is greatly appreciated. So the network thanks you. All righty. Getting on back to the conflict areas, the European Union countries. Remember yesterday we had a story about how the EU was shocked, just shocked at how many EU weapons are in the hands of terrorists. Well, because weapons are big business here. And Europe's arms sector is pretty much unaccountable. They're very influential in the corridors of power. They've got a lot of well-paid lobbyists. And apparently they're approving arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates worth about $86 billion going back to 2015. So it's all about the money, and it's all about the arms sales. And that's why they're looking the other way regarding what happened to Khashoggi. And Bolton's already out there saying that the audio recording exonerates Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, which, no, it doesn't, but that's what we were supposed to be saying. The tape does not show that Mohammed bin Salman ordered the killing, but on the other hand, nobody on the tape says, well, the boss didn't order this. So it's kind of weird here. Okay, we have some callers on the line here. Laura in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was going to talk about Kristen, but then didn't you say that the election voting was turned over to Homeland Security? Well, they did a heck of a job, didn't they? Yeah,
they completely botched it up. Again, Trump just dropped the ball. He shut down.
I want to talk about Homeland.
I'm sorry?
Homeland Security.
Yeah.
I found out about Homeland Security. They only recruit people from Jesuit schools. I happened to find that out one day. They only recruit from Jesuit schools. And I think she and Kelly are rumored to have an affair. And I want to get back to Melania. I'm glad Melania's getting involved. Donald Trump's got 100 things to think about every minute of the day. And sometimes the wife can find out things that the husband doesn't know.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that she's getting involved.
Well, again, we don't know the ins and outs of exactly what's been going down, but apparently Melania would like John Kelly to be fired. The rumors are flying that there's been a lot of friction between them. And as I said, I don't know if it's a case of Melania trying to exert influence over the White House staff or the White House staff trying to exploit Melania as a means to manipulate President Trump. and but it does appear that there's been a lot of friction between members of the staff and Melania, and she's had enough.
Right. Also, I want to give a message to Layla. Saturday night on Deanna Spingola's show,
yeah,
she had the man who owns the Toronto Street News. He was talking about Justin Trudeau. He wants Canada to be the first non-nation. He doesn't want Canadians to think of themselves as Canadian, and he doesn't want the Canadian flag flown. I mean, it's just kind of pretty interesting. If she missed it, it'd be a good show for her to get the archives to Deanna Spingola on Saturday.
Okay.
I mean, no wonder they're in trouble there.
I'm sure that she is still listening to our radio show or watching it on YouTube right now.
Right. So anyway, this voting thing is crazy, you know.
It is.
You know, this person deserves to get fired. I mean, also I want to ask you, are there still U.S. Marshals? Couldn't they get involved?
Technically, they don't have the jurisdiction. The problem is the system is broken, and it's broken all across the country. And one of the areas where the Republicans weren't paying attention was looking at how many of these state election commissions were being taken over by Democrats. And right. I think it was all the years that consent decree was in force where the GOP just sort of got used to the idea about, yeah, the Democrats are going to cheat and there's nothing that we can do about it. But that consent decree has gone away, and it's time to do something about the election fraud. Anyway, Laura, got to let you go. Got to take another break here for commercials. Got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Mateus up in Canada. Mateus, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Yeah, also Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister, is also doing business with the Saudi prince to sell military equipment.
Yep.
So, hey, this is a little bit of an oxymoron. But actually, I guess I shouldn't use that term as it's insulting to low IQ oxes. But anyway, a bit of an oxymoron, but I want to ask non-callers to call in to show support for the following recommendation if they agree. So I just wanted to say that, like, a lot of viewers consider your callers, myself included, to be the worst part of the show, and even stop listening to the show at the first caller. And so I wanted to recommend this, and I noticed it for myself too. And I'm down to calling in at most once or twice a week. So what do you think of these ideas? No callers for the first hour, or at least the first 30 minutes. Turn over that sand timer that you have. If I don't know how long that thing is, if you had it for like 3 minutes maximum. I clocked a 12-minute call a couple of days ago, and the person didn't really have anything new to bring. And, you know, enforce the one call per day rule. Don't allow self-referral like I've done, saying, hey, can you hold me over for commercials? That's not cool. You should be deciding if you want to nominate people to be held over. You know, don't let callers repeat themselves over and over. It's no one caller's fault. It's human nature. Myself included, we have a bad habit of saying the same thing over and over again. And the last thing is, if the caller was not watching the show earlier and they don't re-explain material that you already covered, so that, you know, we all have to listen to the same thing. So anyway, I noticed that I'm starting to skip callers and turn off the shows if I have to skip callers too often, and it's a shame. The whole idea is that we're here for Rivero. We want to hear you, and I'm sure I'm just as annoying to other people as some callers are to me. So I'm not trying to say I'm above this, and I'm going to just I want to hear if any non-callers would agree with this, and I'll just leave it at that and say thank you for hearing me out.
All right, well, thank you for the phone call here, and I understand what you're saying, and I get a lot of emails from people about different callers and whether they like them or not. A lot of people really like Layla from Ontario as one example. There are other emails that are saying, I don't like this caller, and so forth and so on. Managing the callers is kind of tricky, and it's very dependent on how much content I'm able to pull together. I have to fill 3 hours of talk radio 5 days a week, and some days there's a lot of stuff going on and I've got a lot of talking points, and I'll keep the calls short and try and shall we say, shepherd them along in a positive direction. Other days when I don't have as much content to work with, I'll have a tendency to let the callers ramble on a little bit more in order to fill that airtime. So it's kind of a complicated situation. Anyway, we're always trying to do the best program that we can for our listeners, and the callers are an integral part of the programming here. Except for those who are very annoying and obvious shills. And of course, we do keep a block list of certain callers who are not allowed on the air. All right, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and getting on back to the conflict zones here. North Korea is warning that the resumption of U.S. and South Korea drills violate the agreement between the U.S. and North Korea. And basically this goes back to September 19th. North and South Korea signed an agreement that was intended to bar either side from taking any action that could be perceived as hostile. And this was intended to include military exercises with the United States. Now, the U.S. was not a party to the deal, which was between the Koreas. They have, however, gone out of their way to reduce the number of war games being conducted in South Korea. But as tensions have started to rise, the U.S. is looking to reverse that policy. Now, South Korea is downplaying the complaint, saying that they aren't violating the agreement, but just that these exercises are purely defensive. Now, early today, there was this story that came on out. It was over at shtfplan.com, and I labeled it as probable BEX, bovine excrement, because the claim was that there is a new study quoted by USA Today, research conducted by the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Security, that identified 13 of an estimated 20 North Korean missile operating bases that Kim Jong-un has not declared. Now, the reason I labeled it probable BEX is I followed the inner links over to this report from the Center for Strategic and International Security, and as usual, it's the blurry black and white photos with a whole bunch of labels on them that don't really show anything. And as it turns out, Donald Trump has already come on out with a tweet saying, yes, this is more fake news. And there does seem to be a lot of it. I guess creating fake news has become big business in the United States. It's the only part of our economy that's actually growing here. Now, over in Israel and Palestine, tensions are ratcheting up, and apparently there's been rockets fired from Gaza into Israel. Israel has responded. They bombed 150 targets in Gaza. Apparently 7 Palestinians were killed. Israel's back to the old thing about it's all Hamas' fault. It's all Hamas' fault. Hamas has to go. Hamas has to go. But I think something major is going to happen because, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, Israel basically deployed a number of tanks to the border with Gaza. And I think Israel is using agent provocateurs to make it look like Gaza is instigating this, but I think Israel is just going to go on in and clean Gaza out because they just want it back. It's coastal territory. It's valuable land once it's redeveloped. Now, interestingly enough, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg is out there talking about China and Russia's medium-range missiles, of which we don't know whether they have or not. But he's basically saying it's time for China to join the International Nuclear Arms Control Treaty, the INF Treaty, the one that Donald Trump is now pulling out of. And given that NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I'm wondering why Stoltenberg thinks he's got any, truck over there with China. But apparently he's saying that, China's investing in new modern weapons and missiles, half of which would violate the INF Treaty if China were a signatory. Well, China's not a signatory. They never signed the treaty. And with the U.S. invading countries hither and yon, it's not surprising. Countries want to be able to have a deterrent, and that's the reason to have these kinds of weapons as a deterrent. Leave us alone. You leave us alone, we will leave you alone. You invade us, bad things will happen. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Mark in New York. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. Good afternoon.
Thanks you
for taking my call. I had a couple of bullets on 4 different topics with Macron and Acosta, immigration and vaccines, but I'll start with Macron. And to me, it's like a chicken versus the egg when you talked about nationalism. Because back in history class when I was growing up, I remember my history teacher gave this impassioned plea or whatever, or this lecture about how nationalism was based on how people got together and they really stood up and they felt like a part of something and so on. You get where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So my point was, like, how can you have patriotism without nationalism? So nationalism came first, and because of that, you could be patriotic. There's really no patriotism without nationalism forming a country. Think there's any weight to that argument?
Well, I mean, to me, that's the classic definition of nationalism, and it's the one that I grew up with as well. We are a nation. It's called the United States of America, and we are patriotic to the nation, to its people, occasionally when it deserves it to the government. But Macron is pushing this idea that our patriotism is misplaced, that we need to be patriotic to the planet as a whole. It's that globalist New World Order agenda. And like Angela Merkel and so many of these others, they're trying to demonize this idea of being a nationalist, of putting your country first. I mean, that's one of the reasons they are still so opposed to Donald Trump, because he's out there showing that it's okay to support your country first, and let the other countries just, take care of themselves.
Well, I remember my old boss said, well, it's good to get involved somewhat in foreign affairs because it makes the world get around. For our economies to be good, it's good to be involved with other countries, but not in an aggressive or
Well, it's good to be involved with the rest of the world for trade and tourism, but even George Washington said, let's not get entangled up with their problems. We've got our own nation to run here. And all of the major issues that the U.S. has suffered comes from being tangled up with other countries and being induced to follow their agenda around the world. First and foremost, Israel, of course. And Trump is absolutely right. We need to go back to being the United States of America. We need to stop being the catch-all basket for people who are fleeing countries that really aren't working. And if those countries aren't working, they should fix them. You don't see Americans saying, oh, things are really sucky here in the United States of America. I'm going to walk across the border into, someplace else, Mexico, Canada, who knows. We're all here working to try and make our country better, to get it back to being something that we're willing to leave to the next generation.
Yeah, and that touches on my point about immigration. When I was thinking about this proximity migration as opposed to round robin migration or immigration, accepting people. So just the whole idea of them picking and choosing who comes in, say a lot of people from south of the border, as opposed to making sure the world is equally represented. And I think it's weighted too much with this proximity immigration, as opposed to round robin and making sure there's good people with various skills coming in.
Yeah, that's how immigration should be handled. You want to bring in people to the country who can become part of the industrial base. You want people who are not carrying contagious diseases. You want people who are not criminals coming on in. That's just how it was handled back in the 1930s, and it's how it should be handled today. But the globalist New World Order people are saying open borders. I mean, even the United Nations came out the other day and said that migration is a natural human right. So the UN is now out there joining this chorus of voices saying that people who are like down there in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is dealing with that Ebola crisis, they have a natural right to migrate to the United States, and that if we don't allow them in, Ebola and all, that we are somehow bad people.
That's wrong. That's wrong. They got a right to migrate to a neighboring town, but but I don't say crossing the border.
They have a right to migrate wherever they want, but the place they're migrating to has an equal right to secure their borders and make sure that the person coming on in will be a benefit to the society. And if you look at what's been happening up in Europe with all this open border nonsense, you can see it's been a disaster. There are people in Germany who are saying they feel like they've become strangers in their own homeland.
And touching on what this license, you start giving immigrants or illegal immigrants licenses. That gives them the freedom to drive and go anywhere, possibly start getting involved in human trafficking or whatever kind of trafficking there is. And then they sneak in that, and then they say, well, we might as well make it motor voter, because that's a big argument I get with my friend that doesn't see. One of my Bernie friends says, where's the illegal voting? Where's the illegal anything? I don't see it. I said, well, what if in California they allow you to vote? It's an illegal person, but they allow you to vote. So what about those people that on paper it looks like they're legal, but really they were illegal to begin with, and then they were allowed to vote?
Yeah.
And same thing with this licensing. They could sneak in. Another thing is this Acosta thing. I still say it's a boundary issue. You can't go back. You set the ground. He's just a pawn. He took one for the team. He's out. I don't think you and Claire would have him over for dinner. I think he's kind of a creep. I think he was in front of, he's in front of dignitaries, statesmen. He's in front of the president. He's 6 feet away from the president of the United States. He's surrounded by all his peers, or the peanut gallery, whatever you want to call. And then this young woman, it's funny that Mark Simone was saying, I wonder how they pick those guys. Do they draw straws to go out there? Did they let them know, this intern pool, that they were going to have to face Acosta? It's kind of funny. And he said something today, too, about this. Let this guy come in, give it this position. Bring it on. We'd love to hear what he has to say. Because I saw him sit down and then get back up when the next guy was talking. The whole thing was nuts. Somebody I had an argument, same Bernie guy this weekend was telling me, he was throwing out liberal rags on me. I always tell him it's not worth lining the birdcage, a little Levin line. But anyway, he says the USA Today, and I was like, I couldn't find anything that said definitely a liberal rag. And then I looked, I said, why not take a look? Looked under Washington, top of the thing, total smear job against Trump about what Acosta did. Skipped over the whole opening, and it really began with, he asked him about the Russian investigation, and Trump pounced on him. And that's not what happened. There was this whole 4-minute thing that happened, or 3-minute, whatever. You saw it.
Yeah.
And it's clearly obvious to anybody. And just this argument that he didn't do anything, and it's just trying to choke it up. I was wrong. I did it. I shouldn't have stepped up. But I wonder, all these guys are on their phones. So I think when that second time he got up, somebody probably said, his producer sent him something, like right out of Wag the Dog with Rob De Niro.
Yeah.
Telling the guy, I got my phone. You know what I'm saying? Somebody could have said, get back up there, create a thing. So these guys need to know there's a boundary.
Well,
whatever.
you know, CNN certainly needs the viewership right now, and so CNN is out there making news about CNN. Anyway, Mark, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be
Thank
right
you.
back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're just now getting word that Brenda Snipes is probably going to step down from the Broward County elections office at the end of her current term. She's been reelected 4 times. And I wonder how fraudulent those elections were as well. But apparently she's had enough. She doesn't like the attention. Donald Trump basically tweeted out that it's time for Bill Nelson to concede this election to Florida Governor Scott, saying that with all the attention now focused on Broward County, they're not going to be able to gin up enough votes to reverse the original outcome. Apparently, over in Atlanta, a judge has ruled that they must accept and count hundreds of absentee ballots that were rejected because they contained errors, like not having the birth date on them or having the completely wrong birth date on them. And again, could reverse the outcome of that election and put the Democrat back in. A judge has ruled to extend the recount deadline for Palm Beach until November 20th, because everybody's saying it's just too hard filling out these absentee ballots by hand. We need more time. It's Florida 2000 all over again. And I can imagine that some very clever programming executive on the TV networks is scrambling to dig up that movie. It was made in 2015, I think, 2014. No, actually it was made in 2008. It was called Recount, and it was about what happened in Florida in 2000. And that would be worth watching because it's happening all over again. Okay, getting on back to the conflict zones here. Trump is now telling China, he's basically issuing them an order to remove the missile systems from the islands in the South China Sea. And I seriously doubt that China will comply for 2 very important reasons. China sees those islands as their sovereign territory, and that they have a right to defend their sovereign territory, especially in the face of a proven aggressor nation that is operating literally halfway around the globe from where their nation actually is. So whether this is a prelude to Trump saying, well, we're going to have to attack those islands and take those missile systems out. But they are pushing. And again, those islands belonged to China before World War II. During World War II, Japan conquered them. At the end of World War II, those islands were given back to China under the Cairo Convention, which was signed by all the victorious nations of World War II, including the United States. They're not disputed. That's why it's called the South China Sea. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we have a caller on the line. Let's go to Larry in Austin. Aloha, Larry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike.
Hello? Are you there? I think we lost Larry. Okay. Well, try again. We've been talking about this Norwegian warship that got damaged during the NATO drills, and apparently they have been fighting a losing battle trying to keep it afloat. Apparently it's not in a situation where they could like tow it to a dry dock. And at this point, it's almost completely underwater at this point. In fact, it may actually be resting on the bottom. And I mention this again because I do think that modern warships built by nations like the United States are overly reliant on their active defensive systems and are therefore actually quite vulnerable. And I think this accident kind of proves it here. Over in Great Britain, their Ministry of Defense is actively trying to create fully autonomous killer drones. And they're going to be artificially intelligent. They're going to be able to learn. Now, that's a real problem. What happens if they learn to kill the wrong kind of people out there? But they're moving forward with this program. They're calling it Drone Wars UK to develop these autonomous military drones. Boy, James Cameron had it right there when he was out there with the Terminator movies here. John Bolton is out there saying once again that the U.S. is going to squeeze Iran with sanctions until the pips squeak. I'm not exactly sure what that last part means. But it's, again, it's the U.S. throwing its weight around and basically making war on nations solely because those nations will not do what the U.S. tells it to do. That's it. None of these nations that the United States has been making war on for the last 17 years have attacked us. So they're out there still talking about it. Now, one of our callers early today made a reference to this, and because of the worsening trade war with China, a lot of our agricultural produce doesn't have a market anymore. And farmers who are trying to wait out the trade war in the hope that it will be resolved quickly, they're literally stashing soybeans in tool sheds and down in caves, which actually do make good storage areas. And I imagine that there's probably a rush to build some silos. But apparently soybean purchases to China fell 94% between the beginning of September and mid-October. And it's putting pressure on all these Trump-supporting farmers. Anyway, over in Russia, Russian oil exporters are now pressuring Western commodity traders to pay for Russian crude oil in euros. And they're doing it basically as Washington, D.C. is preparing more sanctions against Russia under the claim that Russia stole Crimea. So what's going to happen with all of this de-dollarization? I mean, the global economy is reshaping itself to get along without the U.S. dollar here. All right, let's take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just turned you on, so I'm not sure. I see you talking about that autonomous drone. That's really bad news. But I just want to bring up something that I just heard about the election there in Florida.
Yeah.
This woman, this disgusting criminal, incompetent witch, just said that they're going to keep counting until the 20th of November, even though they were told to stop counting, I believe, today.
No, they got a judge to extend the deadline.
They accepted her deadline?
The Palm Beach deadline. You're talking about Brenda Snipes and Broward.
Right.
Okay, well, yeah, she was under a court order where the counting has to be done today.
Okay, evidently she's disobeying that court order and said they're going to continue counting until the 20th of November.
Well, slap the handcuffs on her then. She's in contempt of court.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm going to say. I was going to say, in a lot of ways, the Republicans are as much to blame for this Democrat, including the clown who's actually running for the Senate, who is still the governor of Florida, Rick Scott. Rick Scott could go in there right now, could, not only should, and order the Florida Department of Law Enforcement or the Florida State Police, or if necessary, the Florida National Guard, seize the entire complex march Miss Sykes out in handcuffs, and then conduct a fair count, or as far as the Cowards County go. But he's not doing it. I understand the sheriff, of course, one of the most crooked and evil sheriffs, evil men in the United States there, Israel, because I believe very, even stronger now than before, that Israel purposely ordered his men to stand down while contractors in full military garb were shooting students down in the halls.
Yep.
The orders of the FBI. Okay. Anyway, he's actually blocking the door to the press and other people. That's why I say it's up to Scott now to send the state police in there, or, if necessary, the National Guard. If this clown really gets out of line, Israel, now I don't think he would. I think he's a punk. I think the minute he saw other armed force coming in, he would get his men out of the way. But who knows? But that's what Scott should do. But he's not doing it, and it's a shame. They already stole Arizona. I'm sure of that.
Yep.
I understand they stole a bunch of House races too. All right. I don't trust anything that went on in this election. And what you're doing, we talk about, Russia this and Russia that, and what a threat they are to us. Well, the real threat is domestic. This undermines everything this country stands for.
Yes.
And that's our vote, the right to vote. If people don't think they have a right to vote anymore, if their vote means absolutely nothing, the next step is a bullet. That's what they say. If you can't do it by the ballot, not by the bullet. But that becomes the next step if they keep this up, or if we don't remedy this. This is not the way to run a country. I heard you think about the anonymous phone. That's bad enough too. I mean, if we start having things like this, these things can just get out of control and decide, you know what, the heck with the human beings, and start attacking whoever is in their way, or even not in their way. But before that even happens, like I said, we are destroying ourselves. This is crazy. We're letting one woman who looks to me like she's maybe about a 70 IQ, if that. I don't care if they call her doctor or whatever else. You get a PhD today, probably just on a piece of toilet paper. Probably about worth that much, her PhD. This woman is standing in the way of this country. She is undermining one woman. One nasty, little, ugly-looking little woman is now holding the entire country at bay. Because if Republicans lose this election, what's going to happen is it's going to go down only to 2 votes again. I'm hoping Trump can get Whitaker to do the job, and Whitaker could would really start going after Mueller and start investigating Mueller and his band of thieves, including all these deep staters and all that.
Yeah.
But they're going to do everything they can to stop Whitaker. I understand they got some kind of a lawsuit now going to stop from Maryland, trying to stop him from even taking office. And the less people he has to support him in the Senate, the worse it's going to be, including with judicial appointments and everything else. So this is how important the election is. And we're going to get one little ugly-looking, disgusting-looking, rat-looking woman.
Let's not get personal. Let's not get personal, but I'm in agreement with you. Yeah, we're seeing the election system corrupted. It does have significant ramifications for the makeup of the Senate, and that's important not only for keeping Whitaker where he is, but again, we're hearing that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is going to retire next January. There's going to be another confirmation process going through the Senate. We're going to have to go through that circus all over again.
Yeah, well, we'd probably still have to go through a circus, but it wouldn't be quite as bad. We wouldn't have to, beg for somebody like Maine. What's that Maine senator's name? Wouldn't have to beg for her to go along with it. We have a little bit more of a cushion. We should have even more of a cushion, but McSally got robbed of that Senate seat there in Arizona. There's no way.
Yeah, like they're trying to rob Scott. They want to chip away at that Senate majority. And the longer they go on, the more they're able to come up with bogus ballots. Frankly, getting on back to what happened in Atlanta, if you've got a bunch of absentee ballots where the birth dates are incorrect, that right there tells me these things are being manufactured in a back room someplace. People know their birthday. If you're buying alcohol or tobacco, you're constantly being asked, "What's your birthday?" So,
Mike, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm saying, I was just listening to this guy the other day, and he was saying that this guy's from Vegas. I forget. He's some kind of I think he's libertarian, but Wayne Allen Root, that's his name, Wayne Allen Root. And he was saying, and I agree. Well, we need first a uniform way of doing federal elections, especially federal elections for the president, senator, Congress. We also need a national ID card, not a national ID card you got to carry all the time, but in order to vote or to register to vote, everybody should have, and this could be, should be federally issued ID card. And I agree. I'm against stuff like this normally, but it absolutely seems to be necessary. That is issued to every American citizen who is registered to vote, and when you do register, or if you register to vote, you get that ID card, and that makes it clear that you're a citizen and you're eligible to vote.
I don't think we need another card. I mean, the government is pushing this Real ID concept for a uniform driver's license across the country, and they've already got it past the state courts. All we need to do is mandate that the Real ID card also have your citizenship status on it, and that's all it would take to be able to vote.
Yeah, but I hate the idea of even having to carry it all the time. I think it would should be, when you go to vote or you go to register.
You carry your driver's license all the time, don't you?
Yeah, but
the Real ID is basically an updated driver's license. You're going to have to carry it anyway to operate a motor vehicle. And all I'm saying is, add a little flag on there to indicate if the person whose face is on that Real ID card is in fact a legal American citizen or legal resident. And that right there is what you need. And we've got to stop places like California from simply handing out, voter registration to anybody who comes into the DMV, because that opens the door to massive amounts of fraud.
The problem, though, with that ID card, with the driver's license, is you got people that don't have driver's license. So then they'll say, "Oh, it discriminates against people that don't have driver's license."
Well,
but if everybody in the country citizen gets issued a voter ID card,
it's too many cards. It's too many cards. And if you don't drive a car, you get a state issued ID card, okay, that you can use to buy alcohol and tobacco and all the rest of that. It's not that big a deal. It's basically simplification rather than adding another card that somebody can lose in their home. Or they're going to have to keep track of it. I think you're going in the wrong direction with this. I really do.
All right, maybe you got a point. You think that new federal license would be okay? Is there any other special requirements they want? Do you have to go to the federal government now to take the driver's test or something like that, or is it just that it'll be issued?
It's issued by the state, but you do have to show a lot of proof of who you are to get the ID. And the next time Claire and I go for our driver's licenses, we got in just under the wire last time, where we could renew the driver's license without a bunch of documents. But next time we go, we're going to have our birth certificates. We're going to have our Social Security cards. We're going to have our passports. And they're going to make sure we are who we say we are. And failing that, we'll fly down to Mexico, walk across the border, and become instant U.S. citizens that way.
Maybe. I'm telling you, that's the way things are looking today.
Yeah, I mean, legal American citizens are having to jump through hoops, and the illegals are being treated like, they're royalty, all because they vote Democratic.
You know what it is, Mike? We're being destroyed from within.
Yes.
We're being betrayed.
Yep.
They're in charge of this country. And I also, we've got very weak leaders, the people he made, including Trump himself, that don't know how to take these people on and do what should be doing. Trump should actually could and should take care of control of this thing in Florida too, being that, it is a federal election. And, but he's not. He's backing down every time somebody gets a little tough. I'm worried he's going to back down now with Whitaker. Okay. He needs to let Whitaker go after the deep state finally. I think he's the man to do it, or at least wants to do it. And he cannot be intimidated by people like Chuck Schuster there in the Senate. I heard Schuster and some other Democrats talking. He's got to be a bulldog. He's got to turn himself into a pit bull. I know about pit bulls. I got 2 of them.
Yep.
They're determined, wonderful dogs, completely loyal, but don't get them started.
Yeah.
And that's what he's got to do. He's got to, he's got to turn himself into a pit bull finally, and then let his other pit bull, Whitaker, make sure he can, that he got all the support he needs. Don't go and pull the rug out from under him like he did to General Flynn, who also knew a lot of stuff and knew for all the, knew about Al Qaeda, about ISIS, who really got them started. And right away they went after him, and Trump pulled the rug out from him, or threw him under the bus, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
He's got to start sticking by these people, the right people. He's got to get rid of the wrong people. He's got to dump somebody like a Bolton and Pompeo and get people who are really interested. Matter of fact, but that thing with that little what's his name there, Frenchman there,
Macron.
He should have told him. Macron, yeah. He should have told him. He should have said, "Okay, you know what? I'm not going to. I don't have nothing to do with you." He should have winked at Putin and gone into a back room with Putin somewhere and says, "You know what? Let's hold a press conference and let's say, you know what? We're not aligning ourselves with the European Union anymore, with NATO. The United States and Russia is now forming a partnership and an alliance because we're both."
Yeah, well, that one, Congress would move to impeach or remove Trump under the 25th Amendment if he did that.
They could do. That's when you go to the American people. That's when you should go to the American people and say why he did it. Because Russia is not a globalist country. They're interested in nationalism too, real nationalism, not the kind of nationalism they're lying about. They're not the Nazis. The Nazis are the ones supported there in the Ukraine. Those are the Nazis. All right, and that's, if he explained it properly, he could do it. But he's not capable of explaining this. It seems like he's either weak, not smart enough, maybe naive. I don't know. But it's really getting frustrating, Mike, because I love this country and I'm seeing it being taken down by a bunch of basically termites.
Okay, well, Mark, I got to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break. I need to go check on Claire, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And, okay. Getting into the economic news here. Well, there's actually very little today. Again, not a good day on the stock market. And I can imagine at some point people are going to start panicking. But there's nothing to support the economy. It's all done by rigging and manipulation. Our manufacturing is down, especially with the tariffs. I mean, I got an email from up in Seattle where Starbucks corporate offices are letting people go. And that's not a healthy sign. Over in New York, we're starting to see more and more of these jurisdictions that are trying to incentivize companies to come open up offices there and create jobs. But after a while, you begin to realize it's not such a really good deal, because New York State is kicking in more than $1.5 billion with a B dollars in taxpayer-funded incentives for getting half of Amazon's second headquarters located in a section of Queens. Now, this will create an estimated 25,000 jobs, but it works on out basically to New York taxpayers paying $48,000 for each job being created. And you would think that Amazon, as successful as they are, wouldn't need these incentives. And I have no idea what that is. Okay, so apparently SecDef Mattis is getting ready to travel down to our border with Mexico to inspect the troops and the preparations. That migrant caravan is getting closer to the border. Right now, the U.S. troops stationed at the border are living in field conditions. They're intense. Apparently, they do not have electricity, which strikes me as, well, you know, get a generator truck down there. Let them have some creature comforts. They're doing a very dirty and ugly job here. Interestingly enough, apparently there is a subgroup in these migrants, the migrant horde, of LGBT people who got kind of tired of the verbal insults, not to mention the poor living conditions. They split off from the main caravan and have managed to reach the city of Tijuana, Mexico, on the border with California. And this group consists of 76 people, who I'm sure will be welcomed into California with open arms. After all, they're minority, they're migrants, they're LGBT. They've just hit all the check marks on everything going. All right, little story here. A guy named Luis Rodrigo Perez, an illegal alien, was arrested in Middlesex County, New Jersey in December of 2017, almost a year ago, on charges of domestic assault and battery. He was summarily released by authorities under a sanctuary policy by local authorities, despite the fact that Immigration and Customs Enforcement requested a detainer on him. From there, Perez managed to make his way to Missouri, where he then proceeded to murder 3 people over a 2-day time span. This is the cost of your sanctuary policy. Innocent people are being killed. And had ICE's detainer request been honored by the Middlesex County Jail, Perez would have been placed in deportation proceedings and sent home to his country. And these 3 other people would be alive today. So it's an ugly situation. Now, incredibly, officials in Middlesex County are actually saying it was all the fault of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It was all their fault, and they're not responsible for the Missouri deaths. Well, they ignored the detainer here. Okay, now, you've probably seen on TV commercials for the Dyson vacuum cleaners, which are very good. And apparently, Dyson has been in a prolonged regulatory battle with the EU. And it was a 5-year legal battle. And basically trying to get the regulation overturned that vacuum cleaners should be tested without dust. Just, you know, run them, measure the power without dust. That's not real world. The whole point of a vacuum cleaner is that there's dust in there, there's debris, and it does affect the airflow, except in the Dyson design. So we've got to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back with the rest of this story about Dyson. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the Dyson vacuum cleaners, and apparently the European Union had this regulation that vacuums had to be tested for their power empty. And because of this regulation where the vacuum cleaners were being tested without any dust in them, it enabled Dyson's German competitors to market their vacuum cleaners claiming they had superior energy, despite the fact that because of the way the German vacuums were designed, the instant they got any dust in their dust bags, their performance dropped significantly. Now, you know, the whole point of the Dyson system is the way it spins that dust around the outside of this container. And so the airflow remains unimpeded. It's a brilliant notion, and Dyson is justifiably proud of it all. But after 5 years in the court system, the EU finally agreed that it would be much more realistic for vacuum cleaners to be tested with dust in the bins, because that's the way they actually operate in the home. So good for James Dyson. Okay. Political correctness has reared its ugly head again. And this is a story that came out of cuzblue.com, where apparently Victoria's Secret has come under attack for having very slender, good-looking, sexy women model their lingerie during the fashion shows. Ooh, bad Victoria's Secret, bad Victoria's Secret. And Victoria's Secret is being lobbied to have plus size, which is a polite way of saying overweight, or gender non-conforming, meaning trannies, as runway models. Well, this gets back to that idea of liberals believing that they can just imagine themselves to be something that they are not, and everybody else should be coerced into going along with it. And it's not real world. Okay, now Victoria's Secret didn't arbitrarily come up with the look of the Victoria's Secret's model. It is something that evolved as our consumer culture evolves. Okay, I'm going to say something here that I'm probably going to get a lot of nasty mail about. There are people in this world who are very pleasant to look at, and there are other people who are not pleasant to look at. That's just the way it is. And especially when you're dealing with a company like Victoria's Secret, they are appealing to a certain clientele who want to have that image about themselves. And I think forcing Victoria's Secret to have overweight or transgender runway models is going to work out about as well as when they made the Miss America pageant drop the swimsuit competition in favor of interviews on what these ladies thought about various topics, which cratered the ratings. Now, I'm sorry, liberals, but life is not fair. There are people who are born more attractive than you are, or they work at it. You know, they diet, they exercise, they take care of themselves, and they work at being beautiful because that's what they want to do. There are people who have been born more intelligent than you. Deal with that. There are people who, when they went to school, took courses other than art history, and as a result are better educated and have more skills than you. And standing around with a group of fellow liberals and saying, I imagine myself as being beautiful, rich, educated, and intelligent, it's fairy tale time. It's really fairy tale time. We've had another one of these horrible incidents. This is over at the University of Chicago. And apparently just 4 days before graduate, well, actually, no, we're going to take a phone call first. Art from Off the Grid, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, just real quick, let's throw this one out. Everybody wants to get twisted. All these people want to get twisted because Victoria's Secret, hey, I'll admit, man, I love watching those girls. I'm not going to deny it.
Yep.
But let's take this to something a little bit more realistic, shall we? How about we start, everybody, let's start protesting Hooters and start demanding short, fat, ugly women covered with acne and battle scars.
Well, would not be a really good idea. I mean, I personally haven't been to a Hooters in a very, very long time because, frankly, the food wasn't that good. And if you take away the girls, then that's another iconic institution that's going to go out of business. And
but you see my point.
Yeah, I see your point exactly. But even so, Hooters has been subject to a little political correctness, because if you go back and you look at the history of Hooters, when they first started out, they catered to an adult crowd. and those waitresses were wearing very thin T-shirts and the hot pants, and that was it. And then as the feminist movement ramped up and said, how dare you, the T-shirts got thicker, they started wearing flesh-colored hose, and so they weren't nearly as they weren't showing nearly as much skin as they did when Hooters was made famous. And we have one down here at the Aloha Tower. I think it's still there. I haven't been down to the tower in a very, very long time. But when I worked across the street at the where we were making Final Fantasy, we used to go over to the Aloha Tower off, for lunch all the time. And that was one of the places we could go to.
Well, I don't know about down there in Hawaii, but I'm here to tell you, you go to the Hooters over here in Augusta, those girls there are leaving absolutely nothing to the imagination, okay? I mean, they are like right down to barely legal, all right? But anyway, thanks, man. I appreciate it. You have a great one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Well, maybe it's something locally here in Hawaii, or maybe it was a policy of the Aloha Tower, which sees itself as family-friendly. Because it's also the cruise ship terminal. We have a couple of cruise ships that do weekly cruises around the islands, and when they pull into Honolulu, they're pulling in right next to the Aloha Tower. Okay, so let's get back to this story. University of Chicago, 4 days before graduation, this university kicked this student out because his ex-girlfriend made a very dubious sexual violence claim. And as it came on out, there's a lawsuit that's involved. It turned out it was a case of malice on the part of the former girlfriend, because they'd had a relationship that was perfectly consensual, and then they had broken up, but they were still continuing occasionally to have consensual sex. It was a friends with benefits kind of arrangement here. But then when her friends found out she was still having sex with this guy, she didn't want to admit it. It made her look bad, so she said, oh no, he came over and forced me. And this guy got kicked out of college 4 days before his graduation. Now he's suing, and probably he'll get his degree. But of course that process of going through the ceremony, that's forever gone. They're not going to recreate that for him. All right, we have another caller on the line, Mark in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. I kind of wanted to talk about the fires. Being from Montana, I live in a state where half the property is owned, and I put that in quote marks, by the federal government.
Yes.
We have to deal with Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service, which means that we have to deal with policies based on environmental extremists that file lawsuits from out of state. And as you know, every year Yellowstone burns down. Last year, I believe we had over 1.2 million acres that burned. And here's the problem. The state really wants to issue lumber permits to go in after the fact, after these fires, and let those guys go in and cut that wood out, use it for firewood, whatever we want to use it for, and the feds just won't let it happen. And it gets worse and worse every year. I'm with the stupid lawsuits. And I think California's problem is the Endangered Species Act, because they have something out there called the kangaroo rat, if I remember, or kangaroo mouse or something like that. It pops on its back legs. So they won't let them remove the brush because it's endangering the habitat of this rat. I feel for the people of California. I'm not a fan of California, not a fan of the goofy politics out there, but God bless the people that are having to live in with this stupidity, because we live with it every year. The difference between us and them is the Forest Circus land, the BLM land. There's no houses built out there amongst them, and out there the houses are interspersed with the forested land. When you put your house out there and they won't let you clear the brush, you're setting yourself up for disaster.
Yes. Yeah. And, lands have to be managed. And one of the interesting things is when the European colonists first came to this country, they looked around at the land and said, this is nature. And in point of fact, they were wrong. the Native Americans were very aware that land has to be managed, that spaces had to be kept clear for certain animals to gather together to make it easier to hunt. The Native Americans would plant their corn and their beans and their squash all together. They didn't separate it out into rows the way the Europeans did, and the reasoning was very simple. As the corn stalk grew, it gave the beans something to cling to. And as the squash grew around the base, it would keep pests away. And so the Native Americans were very much in tune with life on this continent. And in point of fact, what the Europeans saw as, pristine nature was actually being very carefully managed. And you can't just take it and let it go because, again, bad things will happen. Sooner or later, there's going to be a fire. And the only way you avoid the kind of disasters that we're seeing in Southern California right now is that you take steps to prevent and mitigate the fire danger. And they weren't. The money was spent someplace else under the guise of environmentalism. They said, we're just going to let it grow wild and natural. And again, they had an object lesson with Yellowstone. They knew better. They knew what was going to happen. But maybe they were just thinking it won't happen until somebody else is in office.
Yeah, and a big part of that, again, is I'm not anti-government. Well, yeah, I am anti-government. But the feds, they have no idea how to properly manage land. They take some 21-year-old punk out of college, went to school in New York University, and they send him out into Montana as a wildlife expert or a forestry expert, and these guys got no freaking idea what to do. So the first thing they do is just start yelling and barking and bending over to these. Then the BLM and the Forest Service, they decide they're going to put a policy in, and they get sued by the Sierra Club or some of these other clubs that they sound like they're pro-hunting, pro-Montana group, like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and they're not. They're just another environmental screwball outfit that every time they have a lumber permit or they have some kind of a gold mining or a silver mining permit. Copper right now is the big thing.
Yeah.
They come in and just sue the private company into oblivion. I would love to. I have to work in Texas to make a living. And go back and forth. I commute. I would love. There's a new mine they're trying to get open. They've been going at it for 4 years. They're ready to go with the mine, but the environmental groups, every time they pass a hurdle, they file another lawsuit. It's an underground copper mine, and they're concerned that it's going to pollute a watershed. Again, it's underground, and it just will not relent. And it's almost as if they're anti-Montana, that they want to see us fail, so that their lousy, pukey city or state or whatever looks like they're doing something about it. And it's ridiculous. And again, a lot of that, as you know, is kind of the Western attitude towards the rest of the country.
Yeah.
That they just needed to leave us alone to manage our own stuff. I'm actually a proponent of turning these lands back to the state. In the case of the state of Montana, all the land that wasn't settled, that was basically still property of the territory of Montana, was basically taken by the federal government when we became a state.
Yeah.
And that's not right.
No, I agree with you. It's not right, but that's
anyhow,
totally... I'm sorry?
One of these days I need to call in and talk to you about oil and gas and maybe educate everybody out there about it a little bit and kind of give them an idea of what's going on in the industry. But today is not the day, obviously.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And Michael Crichton was a great writer, began his career with Andromeda Strain, and as he obviously came up with Jurassic Park, was living over on Kauai up until he passed. And one of the books he wrote that will never be made into a movie was called State of Fear. And it was about the environmental movement screaming about global warming, and everybody's making lots of money off of it. And right in the middle of it, and it almost felt kind of awkward, there's a character who's introduced that comes in and talks about chaos theory and the natural world. And they make a lot of very, very good points. And I found out the reason it felt awkward is that this had actually been a speech Crichton himself had delivered on several occasions, and he just decided he was going to assign it to this newly created character and drop it in to the middle of the book. And it's an interesting story in and of itself because it talks about the history of Yellowstone Park. And the reason he put that in there is because you had all these groups who were running around screaming about evil corporate interests causing harm to the environment. And Crichton wrote this speech, and he did his research, and he was an excellent researcher. Everything that he claims checks out. Basically said Yellowstone was ecologically and environmentally destroyed many times over. And there were no evil corporate interests. These were people who called themselves naturalists or environmentalists or scientists who just simply did not understand what a dynamic system the park was. And they kept making mistake after mistake after mistake, compounding the errors time and time again. Again, culminating with the decision to allow the park to go back to being wild, of not doing fire break management, which resulted in this horrendous Yellowstone fire. And it was all done by people with the very, very best of intentions. And so anytime you start talking about anything connected with the environment, the first thing you got to do is back up and make sure you understand all of the ramifications of what it is you think you want to do. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, final segment of our program today. And apparently down in Florida, Bill Nelson's lawyers have filed another lawsuit wanting to extend the accounting deadline for, statewide for the U.S. Senate race. And Chuck Schumer has actually come on out and he's sort of given away what's going on here. He came on out and said, and this is a direct quote, "The more time that passes since Election Day, it's looking even better and better for Democrats." End quote. So they're trying to reverse the result of the election is what they're doing. And nobody seems to think that this is a problem. People should be outraged about this. You know, and I think the American people ought to adopt the attitude that if they don't know for a fact that the politicians who are up there in Washington, D.C., or for that matter, the state capitol, were actually the ones who won the election, then that ends our obligation. We don't have to do what they tell us to do. We don't have to pay their bills. We don't have to fight and die in their wars. We can just basically and should ignore them. So it's just getting crazy. All right, over in Kansas State, there's been another incident where apparently Kansas State University police officers were called, basically a week ago, to a school apartment complex to investigate a harassment case. This was reported in the Wichita Eagle, and there was a note using a racial slur posted on a door in the Jardine apartment complex. And there was a Twitter post that went on out from somebody saying, "It's 2018, this was posted on my apartment door. This is still happening here at K-State, so it isn't as evident as it already was. Everyone needs to get out and vote. I refuse to let this blatant racism stop me from moving onward and upward." Okay, the day after the photos were posted was the election day. And they were out there pushing the race card. We've got to show those racists and get out there and vote. Well, it turned out it was another hate crime hoax. The person whose door it was made the note, took the picture, called the cops. And again, a lot of hoaxes out there. Okay. We're seeing this story about Russia and China's attack on Google. And I actually noticed this yesterday during the show. I was trying to go to Google to verify something. I normally don't use Google, but every once in a while I have to. And it just took forever to load. In fact, the first time I went there, it said, "Cannot find the server." But apparently there was what's being described as a virtual war game experiment that hit Google with the worst ever internet hijack. And it intercepted search, cloud, and business services. Google is saying it's no big deal. They're not even sure it was malicious, but it's not very reassuring to people regarding the personal data of millions of users may have been compromised. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do the Jim Goddard show and then other things as well. So stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you are learning here, share them with everybody that you know. Keep everybody focused on the very obvious effort by the Democrats to reverse a lawful election. And they're not even trying to hide the fraud. Apparently, there's even been an outbreak of pushing and shoving at one of these counting centers. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.